Tuesday, October 21st, and we are into Week 8. Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. To be quite honest, it was looking like kind of a boring waiver wire week. Even with 6 teams on a bye, there just wasn't necessarily a guy who's jumped out other than Oronde Gadsden. Dave, did we mention Oronde Gadsden on Sunday's show?
No, I think we should spend 5 minutes talking about him and then another 5 minutes comparing him to literally every other player in the National Football League.
Okay, we could try that. But then, of course, we get big injury news on Monday night with Mike Evans out for most of the season, maybe all of the season, with a broken collarbone, and Nico Collins exiting with a concussion. And now Tez Johnson's looking pretty good, and Cade Otton could be your number 1 tight end. We'll see. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about Chris Godwin's return and how that might impact him. And good morning, Jamey. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
You feel good at 49? How's it feel like get out of bed at age 49?
Same way I did at 48. But you have to go to bed, though.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
A lot of rewriting the waiver wire column at 2 in the morning.
Yeah. Good riddance to the Monday night doubleheader.
What time did I send you that email changing the order?
Oh, let's see. That was at 149.
Let's compare this to Oronde Gadsden just to keep up with how we've been doing shows lately.
Well, you did change the order a little bit. So what's your top 3 priority list right now?
I would still go Gadsden 1. I would go Cade Otton 2 and Joe Flacco 3.
Not a single wide receiver, huh? That's interesting.
I think with the receivers. So first off, none of the injury guys are my favorite. I had Darnell Mooney as my favorite because I think there's long-standing appeal there.
Sure.
With the receivers, it's not a long-term injury for Nico Collins. At least that's the expectation. So the situation in Houston and Christian Kirk could potentially return this week. And then the situation with Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin could return at any point soon. Plus, they still have Emeka Egbuka and Cade Otton. So I do think Tez Johnson's worth adding. I do think that Jalen Noel is worth adding. But I don't think you should rush to go get these guys. It's very similar to this has been the case with this position every week, every year, all season long. There's been a guy who has popped up, and then essentially that guy has disappeared. There's been not a lot of long-term standing production from injury replacements or somebody, just doing something special the previous week. It just hasn't been sustainable, at least unless I'm missing somebody. But I think in the case of the tight ends, like there are guys that could be somewhat sustainable. I also wouldn't break the bank at tight end because there's so many guys being potentially sustainable.
I think if you picked up Wan'Dale Robinson after week 1 in advance of his Cowboys game, that might have been the best. But even he had 3 horrible games in a row.
Right,
you have to hold on to him.
Yeah.
It's also right. You picked him up and then probably dropped him and then picked him up again after Malik Neighbors got hurt.
Yeah, in the shallower leagues, there may have been a guy who's been better. And for example, there's a good question here. And Dave, I'm sorry, I'll get to your top 3 very shortly, but I think this is a good question. Would you pick up Chris Godwin, who's 79% rostered, or Tez Johnson? And does Chris Godwin, this is now my question. Does Chris Godwin have now an opportunity to be a must start? We've seen him 2 games. I mean, all right, I'll let you answer the question, then we can talk about it. But would you pick up Godwin or Tez Johnson if they were both available?
Tez.
Godwin.
Different answers there. All right, Dave, what are your top 3 priorities?
I'm going to go in a different direction than Jamey because I just think that we need to talk about wide receivers. There's like 20 of them that are missing this week due to injuries or buys or what have you. So I think people need receivers to replace. My top 3 for wide receiver, and I might flip this in show, but as of now, it's Mooney 1, Tez Johnson 2, and Marvin Mims 3. And it doesn't mean that I'm picking all 3 of those guys over the Oronde Gadsdens and Cade Ottons of the world. And if you need a quarterback, then of course Joe Flacco makes a ton of sense. But I'll just give those 3 as my top 3, not meaning that they're necessarily the top 3. It's probably the top 3 for a high percentage of everybody watching and listening because we need receivers this week.
All right, Jamey, one more time. Give me your top 3.
Gadsden 1, Otton 2, and Flacco 3.
Okay. There are a lot
if I had to give a legit top 3, Adam, it would probably be in the neighborhood of Gadsden 1, Otton 2, Mooney 3.
I think there's a lot of Adam. There's so many quarterbacks missing this week that Flacco, with what he's shown and what his matchup is, there's nobody that comes close to him on waivers.
Nothing compares to him.
There's just one thing I'd say about that is that there are a lot of quarterbacks who are rostered in well, there are two quarterbacks who are rostered in just over 65% of leagues that you're not including, that are Jackson Dart and Aaron Rodgers.
Fair.
And they're close enough to the threshold that maybe we throw them in this discussion here.
Fair.
And would Jackson Dart be the prize on waivers this week with Rodgers?
I would take Dart over I'd go Dart, Flacco, Rodgers for this week.
Me too.
And rest of season, Dart, Flacco, Rodgers?
Dart.
Probably.
Yes. I'd rather roster Jackson Dart and then figure out Flacco, Rodgers on a week-to-week basis.
Okay. So it seems like if there's a guy on waivers that is more than just a week-to-week thing that you think could actually help us for a chunk of the season, if not the entire season, who would that guy be? Jamey.
That's why I go Gadsden first, just because I think with how poor the Chargers are going to run the ball, how much they're going to potentially throw the ball, even though there are 3 receivers that could be in his way, what we've seen the last 2 weeks, I hope is sustainable for Gadsden. In the case of Otten, it may be sustainable, but you throw Godwin back in the mix, and then if Tez Johnson becomes a thing, then does he become what he's been most of his career, which is somewhat irrelevant? In the case of Schultz, I mean, he's had 4 very solid games. We've been talking about this for a month now. Like, just quietly 8 PPR points, 9 PPR points, 11 PPR points. That's kind of been, it was 8, 8.9, 11, and then last night. They can't run the ball either. And their second receiver has been non-existent the entire season as well. So that position can help you for this week off waivers. For long-term, though, I think it's Gadsden. So, and then Mason Taylor, too, for a 1-week situation. Going back just to the matchup, like, I didn't realize how many touchdowns the Bengals have given up in the last 3 weeks to that position alone. 7 touchdowns to tight ends in the last 3 weeks, 9 on the season. So it's a great opportunity for him. But look, Darnell Mooney could be sustainable all season long. Tez Johnson could be sustainable all season long because of Evans' injury. I just don't buy it with Godwin coming back. And then the other receivers, just Juwan Jennings is in our range that we talk about and just had the most targets for the 49ers. But is that sustainable based on what we've seen? So it's hard to say that anything really is sustainable for the group of guys that we're talking about.
I don't think there's anybody that you pick up with the idea of, oh yeah, this guy's going to be a must start every week rest of season. I know Gadsden's been awesome the last 2 weeks, and you want to hope that he's that guy. But Jamey, you laid it out. Like, there could be a target crunch there. The other shoe could drop on Gadsden. I do think there might be some staying power to Tez if he continues to play well on the limited targets that he gets. But it's absolutely contingent on, when does Godwin come back? When does Jalen McMillan come back? Does the other shoe drop for him anytime soon? So I don't know if other than Gadsden, I don't know if there really is a rest of season guy outside of quarterback.
Dart.
That's out there. Right.
Like we would agree.
Dart would be a rest of season guy. Flacco might be too, man. That team is still going to struggle to run the football no matter who they play. And Flacco's proven now over 8 quarters that he can connect with those receivers.
I'm real quick, Dave. I want to talk about the Bucs situation a little bit more and just talk about our expectations for Chris Godwin and all that. But why'd you go with Marvin Mims over Troy Franklin? Because I certainly agree that we should be looking at that Broncos receiving core against the Cowboys with Franklin and Mims both fairly available. Your thoughts there?
I think Mims just offers some unique versatility that I would want to take advantage of versus Franklin, who has been getting more opportunities, certainly has a higher route rate than Mims, but it just hasn't come through in any kind of consistent way. His touchdown last week was fluky. When the Broncos have played against bad secondaries, Mims has come up with at least double-digit PPR points. Against the Giants, 15.8. Against the Bengals, 20.5. And then you look at the matchups against tougher secondaries. Against the Jets, 4.8. The Eagles, 3.9. I view this matchup against Dallas as a high-scoring one. I'm sure the total reflects it in Vegas. You want to take pieces of players in high-scoring games, especially this week when there's 3 fewer games, and we're looking for warm bodies that have some upside. Mims has that upside, so it's a 1-week rental. It's not a rest of season thing, but I would lean toward Mims over Franklin. Plus, we've bought into Franklin before, and he hasn't come through. I feel like the timing is right for Mims, and the matchup is right for Mims.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the Bucks wide receivers. And by the way, Travis Hunter is also 70% rostered. He's another guy that if he's available, might be. Yeah, he might be. Right, exactly. All right, so before we get into some other things, we are on CBS Sports Network at 1 p.m. Eastern today to talk more about the waivers. And a lot of times we have a little more information then so we can clarify some things. So watch CBS Sports Network, 1 p.m. Eastern. And we are also going to answer your questions at the end of that show. And for football fans, I need you to get on to BetMGM. So you bet on your favorite player to score the first touchdown in the game, but his teammate scores instead. If this happens, BetMGM wants to give you another chance at the end zone with BetMGM's second chance promotion. You're going to get your stake back if your first touchdown scorer scores second instead. That's right. You bet on any pro football player to score the first touchdown of the game. And if you're right, you win. If your player scores second, you get your stake back in cash. With BetMGM's second chance offer, you have a chance to keep the fun going after the first player crosses the goal line. So try a first touchdown scorer wager with confidence today. Also, use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. And if you make a bet and your first bet loses, you could get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your bet loses, if you use the bonus code FANTASY on BetMGM. BetMGM, make it legendary. Okay, so this is just a huge opportunity for the Buccaneers pass catchers here, with Evans out for most, if not all of the season. And Chris Godwin, yes, could be on his way back. But I think just looking at the chat, seeing some of the comments, I think people, and I'm kind of in this boat, I don't know what to expect from Godwin, and I have a fear that he's just not going to be that good. So, Jamey, how do you see this playing out? You're obviously expressing some caution in terms of picking up Otten and Tez Johnson. They have a bye in week 9. So maybe Godwin's back after that. Just your thoughts overall on what we're going to be seeing here, because obviously major opportunity and a great passing offense.
It might just be 1 week for them because Godwin could return after their bye week. And I think for a team that went into last night 5-1, now they're 5-2, what their aspirations are after the playoff runs that they've had the last couple of seasons. So my guess is they're going to be cautious with Godwin and make sure that he's right now, knowing that Mike Evans is out for potentially the entirety of the season or entirety of the regular season. So they're not going to risk Godwin coming back at less than 100%. So that could give Tez Johnson some more staying power. So I think as a short-term rental, at least for week 8 against the Saints, you want to pick him up and he can potentially help you win a week. But I would assume, total assumption, that when Godwin's back, if he's healthy enough to play, he's going to play. And he's probably going to command 6 to 8 targets at worst. So where does Tez Johnson fall? And Dave mentioned the wild card in this, which I don't think a lot of people are factoring, is what happens if Jalen McMillan heals from his neck injury? He's going to be playing over Tez Johnson as well. So I wouldn't go crazy with, okay, is this a guy that can step into Mike Evans' role and be the savior? Now, he might, because you've had Godwin now 2 separate injuries, and they may do the same thing, is just continue to push, kick the can down the road and say we want to make sure he's ready for the playoffs because we know what he can do when healthy. But there's also Emeka Egbuka there, and Cade Otton led them in targets last night. So it's not like there's or tied for leading targets. It's not like there's not other options there where Tez Johnson is going to automatically command, the ability to dominate from a passing perspective.
And Dave, what are your thoughts?
I think we will see Egbuka and Tez on the outside the most for Tampa, and it'll be that way next week if Chris Godwin isn't back. And maybe even if Godwin is back, maybe they ease him in. I mean, Tez Johnson just offers that offense more speed. They've got it with Egbuka. Tez is making plays. I love the catch and run for a touchdown. It's a different way for him to score compared to last week with the deep ball. And so as long as they keep involving him, and he had 8 targets. We're talking about him not getting enough targets. He had 8 targets after Evans went down yesterday. And I just think that
Also
there will be
trailing
an
by
opportunity.
2 scores.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And they're playing New Orleans this week. That's probably going to be a game where they don't trail. Yeah, I get where you might be worried about game script with Tez Johnson this week, but he's got one play boom upside. And so I'm willing to invest in that the same way that I'm willing to invest in Marvin Mims for the exact same reason.
Okay. It's a tough call. Johnson looks pretty fun out there. And man, Kate Otten is so good when Evans has been out. And, you know, well, he's number 2 in Jamey's waiver wire order. So
He's actually my favorite of the replacement tight ends for this week.
yeah.
You'd start him over Gadsden, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the thing is with tight end is it does sort of feel like you can go week to week with that position. In anything, 10 teams, obviously, even 12 teams. Like, you know, my wife has Bowers on a bye and Darren Waller, and she's asking me, who should I pick up? And by the way, she's 7-0. It's kind of pissing me off.
Shocking.
Yeah. And I was like, pick up this guy, pick up this. Oh, wait, they're all available? I don't know. Well, just let me think about it. We could come back to that.
Well, that's the thing about spending FAAB on the 1 week replacement options. So you're down Bowers for several weeks, but clearly on a bye this week, even if he's healthy. You have Nola Porter, you have Nolan McBride. So there are a lot of people chasing that position for this week. And those managers have some options, but how much do you spend on FAAB for those guys versus the managers that need that position?
Yeah.
And how desperate are they going to be? So I think that the nice thing about it is you have Schultz and maybe you have Juwan Johnson back. And there's still Mason Taylor, who a lot of people are disgusted with, which I get. But now you're facing the Bengals, and it's a great setup.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about FAAB in just a moment. We got to take a break. We'll give you our FAAB thoughts. We'll give you the news and notes. Lamar Jackson missing practice to begin the week, and some other quarterback news. We got to give you there's a great DST out there for you, and we'll be right back on FFT. Okay, real quick before FAAB, if there were one guy out there that's available in a decent amount of leagues, talked about Jackson Dart, Chris Godwin, Travis Hunter. I'm not sure if there's anyone else. Dalton Kincaid has been great. Who's that dream free agent that if you saw that you would absolutely pick up first, Dave?
Bijan Robinson. I don't know if there's a dream free agent. I kind of reject the notion of your question that there's like some sort of magical unicorn that's sitting out on waivers at this point.
I mean, to see Travis Hunter do what he did is enticing. To see Godwin have this opportunity is enticing, but maybe it's Tez Johnson and not Godwin.
I'd rather have Hunter, to be honest.
Okay, well, that's what I want to know. To see Jackson,
I'd have to be in such a good position with my roster in a week where there's so many people missing to prioritize Hunter. Or I could be in a bad position, but there's so much on the waiver wire where I don't view a discernible difference between, and I do, but let's say I'm somebody watching or listening and I don't view any difference between Mooney, Tez, Mims, Franklin, etc. And I can go and make Hunter my number one priority. And then my second priority will be whatever's left from those other receivers.
Jamey, any thoughts? You could even throw Aaron Jones in there. He's 84% rostered and eligible to come back this week.
I'll go back to tight end again, where you have Fannin at 72%, Pitts at 72%. Like, it's pretty loaded for finding guys that have been productive and in good spots for this week.
Okay.
Like, you get Pitts against the Dolphins. Like, that's pretty exciting.
How about, the Dolphins are giving up, I don't know, the 6th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers.
Everybody, I bet it wasn't that way going into last week.
It's not just a fluke. They see the 2nd fewest wide receiver targets.
Because nobody throws on them because everybody runs on them.
Exactly. And think about what the Falcons are about to do to them with Bijan Robinson. So that's, I don't know, a little word of caution for Mooney. I'm sure he could have a good game, but teams do.
I don't think this is a pick up and start right away. Like, I don't think any of the receivers are must starts in 2 receiver leagues. I think there's some good options in 3 receiver leagues, from Tez to Noel to Jennings, and I prefer Franklin over Mims, but they're kind of back to back. So either Broncos guy, there's a lot to like about those situations.
Yeah, this week is breaking my brain a little bit because if Nico Collins is out this week, I think Dalton Schultz could be awesome. And then Jalen Noel, you're talking about what if Christian Kirk comes back? There are a lot of moving parts this week. Hopefully,
and think about even how last week unfolded, where we were like, oh, here's all these great Bucs receivers, and then Evans returns and surprise, Mecca Buka play. Like,
yeah,
we wouldn't be in this spot if Evans didn't get hurt.
Mecca Buka's star percentage last night. Any guesses?
11%.
48%.
Closest without going over was Jamey at 14%. Okay, how much FAAB are we spending this week? Jamey, what do you think?
I wouldn't spend much at all because, again, the receivers, clearly it's a record situation and how desperate you are from a bye week situation. So let's just put that out there first. Like, if you need to spend to win, you're going to spend to win. But in the case of, I think, really everything except quarterback. So let's just take away the guys that are in the 67, 68% range. And you start with Flacco, who's at 22%, and look at those guys that are widely available. That might be the position where you have to spend the most, and especially in Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues when you're talking about who's missing. With now Fields potentially getting benched and Bryce Young being out, you might be chasing Andy Dalton, might be the most expensive player that you're paying for. But I wouldn't go crazy. Again, there's just so many tight end options. There's so many of the same type of receiver options that, hey, great matchup, great opportunity, maybe long-term, potentially just short-term. Like, you're going to be probably upset with yourself for spending too much FAAB on one of these guys. There's definitely not that player at running back.
My goodness. I am surprised, but it makes sense. I'm really glad that I get to talk this all out with you guys, because in my mind, I was thinking we'd be a little more excited about Otton and Tez Johnson. But what you're saying makes sense for sure.
Well, it's 1 week and then a bye and then mystery box, because we don't know when Godwin will be back. Like, if you were to say right now, like, Todd Bowles comes out and says, yeah, it's disappointing Mike Evans is out for the rest of the regular season. We hope they're going back for the playoffs, and we hope that Chris Godwin's back for the playoffs by that point. Like, if you hear that, then I think you get a little bit more excited for those two guys, and Tez Johnson and Kidon. And I'm not saying that Tez Johnson doesn't have more than a 1 week window, because we just don't know with Godwin. He came back from the ankle injury and re-aggravated something else, and he's not exactly a young guy anymore. And they have guys that they can replace with, so replace him with. And then there's a Jalen McMillan factor, so there's just a lot of moving parts with this entire thing.
Yeah. I am much more from the vantage point of get me through week 8. Get me through the bye weeks. I'm missing so many players at wide receiver. I'm not thinking too far down the road at that position. I just need to get through this week, and then I can figure it out later. I can always make ad drops later. And that's why I don't want to spend not even like 5% of FAAB on any of these wide receivers.
Wow. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've got to take this shot on Tez Johnson. Obviously, based on what you're saying, I don't feel like I have to spend that much. But I feel like even if Godwin were back, I feel like there's still an opportunity for him, because he's a big play guy, right? Like, he's running away from people. He's making big plays. Baker's going to throw deep. Baker's been a big play guy this year. I think my biggest issue is I don't know if it's going to be Johnson or Otton that I should be prioritizing, because Otton could really, really be great for as long as Chris Godwin is out. And maybe after, because Godwin looked horrible in week
7. Game. Yeah. His
So
first game, he looked good. His second game, he looked bad. It was very strange.
Horrible. And I just don't know what to expect from him at this point. He has had one hell of a calendar year, or one hell, 365 days. But whenever he basically got hurt a year ago, right? It's been rough for him. And if he's not right and he's not back soon, I think we're missing a major opportunity with these guys. I feel like you might overpay, but you almost have to take a shot. I don't know.
Oh, it's definitely worth taking a shot. Again, I don't want to sit here and say don't be aggressive in trying to get these guys, especially if receiver has been a problem for you. And look, we just lost Mike Evans. We've been dealing with various injuries. Terry McLaurin's barely played. Puka Nacua is on a bye, missed last week. We don't know if he's 100% guaranteed to return. Quarterback issues have hurt, receivers at times this season. Like, look at Zay Flowers right now. Lamar Jackson not practicing on Monday. So if he's not back again, Flowers in a little bit of a tough spot. So, if you want to just take what Dave said, which is completely fair. And I need to get through 1 week, and Tez Johnson against the Saints in what could be a great matchup gets me through that week. Yeah, you do it. And then you just kind of sit on it and see what happens week 9 plus, depending on who's healthy for Tampa Bay, because we are talking about a guy that struggled to return from his knee injury a few years ago and play at the same level. He struggled to return from the ankle injury, 2 surgeries already, to play at the same level. So yes, it could be Tez Johnson and Ibuka until they make sure Godwin's right and they give him a few weeks of practice to do so. So it wouldn't be a surprise. But I just think in terms of the FAAB conversation, like you could be spending on a player for a 1 week rental, does nothing in week 8, has a bye in week 9, and then come week 10, he's relegated to a lesser role because everybody's healthy.
Adam.
Yes, Dave.
Todd Bowles just gave an update right now that both Godwin and Bucky Irving are getting better, but he's not sure if they're in play for Sunday against the Saints. So not expressing optimism after the game last night makes me feel a little bit better about both Tez and Otten and their opportunities for this coming week against New Orleans. Plus, it would make sense that if those guys are still not at 100%, they can get by this week against New Orleans, then they have the bye, and then they can come back. So to your point, if you really love what Tez has shown you, and there's a lot to love about him, and obviously we know the track record with Otten, and I would be much happier with Otten if Godwin isn't playing, you could spend more than 5% on those guys because we're trying to win a week. Those guys could potentially start for you. Could you go up to 10%? I bet you can get away with a little bit less than that for Otten and a little bit more than that for Tez, depending on how aggressive your league is. Because I'm telling you, a lot of people need receivers.
Can I give you a take here? I think someone is going to go bonkers for Tez Johnson in a lot of leagues. I'm seeing it.
That's when I'd much rather spend just a few bucks on one of the other receivers then.
Okay. All right, guys, let me get
to
the
notes. Again,
it could, but it might pay off for only 1 week. And if you're going bonkers, when I hear bonkers, I'm thinking like 30% FAAB.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen. I mean, that's just I have no idea, but I'm seeing in the chat that somebody said Tez is a league winner. Chris Godwin's got all these injuries, but I think there's going to be a faction of fantasy managers out there that are going to feel that way about this situation. And not saying they're right or wrong, but that's the thing with FAAB is you're always competing against just that one person who's willing to throw so much out there. So you know what? Let them do it. Don't.
Well, that's the flip side of your favorite thing of the FAAB report is that.
Yeah,
you're like, oh, I got the guy. Oh my God, I spent $30 more than everybody else. Like it goes both ways.
All right, let me get to the news and notes here. And first of all, I'm so sorry to see it, but Doug Martin passing away at age 36. He was one of my favorites. Loved watching him run. And what'd you say?
The muscle hamster.
Yeah,
the muscle hamster.
One of the best nicknames ever.
25 carries, 251 yards, 4 touchdowns, plus another 4 catches for 21 yards in week 9 against the Raiders of his 2012 rookie season. I'll never forget that. And the reaction that we had in fantasy. It was an incredible game for Doug Martin. And, so just sorry to see it. Our thoughts to his family and friends. Yeah. Quarterback news, Lamar Jackson missing practice. And they seemed like they thought he was going to play coming out. And then he might, but not a great start to the week. Jaden Daniels, we're not expecting him at this point, although he avoided a serious injury. So we'll see. Marcus Mariota certainly in play. He seems to score 20 fantasy points whenever he starts or plays for the Commanders. Bryce Young, he's got a high ankle sprain, could miss a little bit of time. It started out really good for Andy Dalton last year when he took over. He had over 300 yards, a big game in his first game, and then he just got worse and worse and worse, and culminating with a game where he threw for something like 80 yards. Michael Penix day-to-day with a bone bruise in his foot. I think we're expecting him. Kyle Shanahan said it would be a reach to say that Brock Purdy is on track to start this week. Doesn't mean Purdy won't, but we can't sit here and say with optimism that Purdy will start this week. Kellen Moore seems like he's going to be taking the quarterback situation kind of week to week. I don't know. I feel like Spencer Rattler's been blown away expectations, but they got to think about their future and see what they have with Shuck. So that's something to be mindful of. Tua is going to start this week, maybe week 9 for JJ McCarthy, according to Adam Schefter. And Justin Fields, we don't know who's going to start for the Jets yet. Justin Fields or Tyrod Taylor, they're at Cincinnati, and then they have a bye. Good news is they could be getting Garrett Wilson back. Running back news, Kendry Miller tore his ACL. Devin Neal would be the next man up, we think, for the Saints.
Yeah, you'll hear his name today.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt has an
Oh,
ankle
yeah, you will.
injury, but Brees Hall is dealing with an injury. Aaron Glenn said he's fine, but we'll keep an eye on it. He's probably going to be limited or not, maybe not even practice Wednesday. Wide receiver news. Would like to get an update on Brian Thomas Jr. I'm assuming it's nothing too serious. They're going into their bye. Mike Evans with the collarbone, going to miss most of the season. Nico Collins left with a concussion. Tennessee released Tyler Lockett and Garrett Wilson. Again, he is in play for this week. Tight end news. Darren Waller is going to be week to week with a pectoral injury. Cole Kmet left with a back injury. Dalton Schultz left, but he came back, thankfully. And David Njoku is day-to-day. Offensive line, there's a lot of offensive line stuff. There's a ton of defense stuff. Sauce Gardner, not only could Joe Flacco have a good game, but he could be facing the Jets without Sauce Gardner. Even better situation there. Roquan Smith, great linebacker for the Ravens. He expects to play this week against the Bears. San Francisco is so beat up on defense, even more now.
Mm-hmm.
Renardo Green, a cornerback, he left in the first half. Bryce Huff is going to miss a few weeks with a hamstring injury. San Francisco also lost its starting center for a few weeks to a hamstring injury. Washington edge rusher Dorrance Armstrong tore his ACL. He's out for the year. He's their leader in sacks. That's a big loss for them. Colts are a little beat up. They get Tennessee this week. Tennessee's a little beat up. They get the Colts this week. And the Eagles signed Brandon Graham. Welcome back. Welcome back. And those two Giants defensive backs, I was trying to find an update on them, but not that you're going to sit the Eagles pass catchers necessarily, but it makes it even better if Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo are not playing. Let's go to the top three at each position and start at quarterback, Jamey. And what are we looking at here?
Joe Flacco would be one. Just, again, taking advantage of what we saw the last two games as the starter and the matchup he has against the Jets for this week, but also moving forward. I mean, he's averaging 46 pass attempts per game, and hopefully that's sustainable. I have Mariota 2 and Penix 3. It's a little gross after Flacco in my mind, because there is a chance, as you alluded to, that Jaden Daniels could play based on what Dan Quinn said. But he would be the next best option if we're talking about just from a 1 week situation. And then I don't love the fact that Penix is banged up. I don't love the fact that they may run a lot, but that just kind of tells you the state of the position. I'll take the guy playing the Dolphins if there's an opportunity for him to be the starter there, because I think he can get what Justin Herbert got a couple weeks ago, which is around 225 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Okay, yeah, each of the first four quarterbacks faced the Dolphins scored 29 or more fantasy points. It hasn't been as fruitful since because of the running.
2 of the last 3 have been under 20.
Yeah, because the running back, you had like the Rico Dowdle game, and who was before that?
Well, it was Bryce Young. It was Bryce Young, then Herbert, then Dylan Gabriel last week. So Herbert was good. It started with Bryce Young being under 20.
Yeah.
He still had 2 touchdowns against them, though.
And I know you said this earlier, but let's throw it in again. If Aaron Rodgers and Jackson Dart are in the mix, you said you'd go Dart, Flacco, Rodgers?
For this week, yes.
Rest of season, you'd go?
Same.
Okay. All right, running back. Dave, we haven't talked a lot about running backs. What do we got this week?
Because they stink. Because there's nothing out there. Bam Knight is going to be your best running back to add, 43% available. And it might only be for 1 week, and it would be next week, not this week, week 9 against Dallas. He could be the lead back for the Cardinals there. Although they're mucking up their backfield. They brought in Dearness Johnson. He knows this offense. He was their third down back last week. It was very frustrating. We'll see how they come out of the bye, reshuffling that deck of crapola. But he's number 1. Kyle Monangai is number 2. I would put Isaiah Davis third on this list. And it's a different order if you're desperate for a running back this week. It would probably be Tyjae Spears at the top, but I don't feel great about that. If Tyler Algier were somehow out there, he would be toward the top of the list too, but he's 31% available. But rest of season with the eyeball on this, Bam Knight 1, Monangai 2, Isaiah Davis 3. And you could talk me into Davis over Monangai pretty easily if you wanted to.
So I think just one thing with this position to keep an eye on, and you alluded to this, Adam, we don't know the injury status fully for Breece Hall. And we also don't know the injury status fully for Kareem Hunt. So if they show up in practice and something is bothering them after they got hurt, I think there's potential for Brashard Smith as well as Isaiah Davis. And in the case of Davis, the trade deadline is November 4th. There is clearly a path to huge success for him if Breece Hall is traded. So if you want to stash Davis now, on the chance that he may play a little bit more this week because they are playing the Bengals, and then the opportunity if he's traded because Braylon Allen's out for probably at least another 4 or 5 weeks.
Okay, give me Davis second. That sold me over Monangai.
Yeah, can I
I'll actually take Monangai first, just because I think what we saw the last couple of weeks, like, yes, if you have the ability to look long term, you can prioritize Bam Knight first, but this is more of a position I think you go week to week.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Monangai finally got a lot of work. I wonder if it was because DeAndre
was
on the injury report.
Well, that's part of it.
It was because the Saints couldn't stop the run. And the Bears offensive line, it's 2 weeks now. Like, they've been playing much better. They've been blocking it up much better. But let's be real about it. How many games are you going to see Kyle Monangai have even 10 touches, much less 13 carries in the
I think in the case of 2 guys in particular, maybe even 3 if you want to throw Brashard Smith in there, you have 3 defenses that they're all facing that are terrible. And so you could see a situation if Lamar Jackson does not play, that the Bears are doing a similar thing to the Ravens that they just did to the Saints, which is running the ball a lot in the end of the game. You could see a situation where the Jets are just leaning completely on their running game against the Bengals because they've been so miserable against the run. So Isaiah Davis maybe gets a little more playing opportunity, especially if Breece Hall is not 100%. And in the case of Brashard Smith, he just had 14 carries with Kareem Hunt getting banged up, his most work of the season, and they're playing a home game against the Commanders, which may be with Marcus Mariota starting. So we could see some blowout situations for these running backs, especially after we just saw it in the case of 2 of them last week.
Yeah.
Just to throw one more name out there that I don't think was going to be in the show notes, and I understand he could give you like 2 points. But especially if Lamar Jackson doesn't play, maybe Justice Hill, just because there are 6 teams on a bye, and they've been so bad that they could be behind and throwing when Lamar Jackson doesn't play. He's got 2 or 3. He's got, I think, 3 games this year with like 4 or more catches. So please don't take this as me telling you to go pick up Justice Hill. But if you're super desperate, no one's looking at him. All right, let's get the top 3 wide receivers. And while we do that, I want to apologize. I honestly feel bad, and my confidence is shaken by me being very high on Jameson Williams yesterday. So I apologize for that. He did not have a single catch on 2 targets. That game simply did not play out anything close to the way I thought.
Either side, really.
Yeah,
agreed.
totally.
Right.
The defense has played well. Give him credit. Jamey, who are the top 3 wide receivers?
So Mooney would be one for me, just with him now back and long-term standing. But if you don't want to use him for this week and you want to go with Tez Johnson, I certainly get that. I would go Tez Johnson second, Jalen Knoll third, and then Juwan Jennings fourth.
If Christian Kirk were playing, would that ding Knoll for you?
100%.
Okay. And I don't know his status. I'm surprised that he didn't play coming out of the bye.
Yeah, that was one that I didn't see until the weekend.
Dave, tight ends, top 3 tight ends.
If it's just for this week, it's Otten 1, Gadsden 2, Mason Taylor 3. Oh, it's so gross suggesting Taylor. If it's rest of season, it's Gadsden 1. It might be Taylor 2, and then Otten 3.
So you're not Schultz in the top 3 this week?
No, I'm not yet.
I would start Schultz over Taylor if Nico's out.
But not over Otten or Gadsden?
No.
I think I'd start him over Gadsden. I gave a comparison yesterday. Remember, like a little more than a year ago, it was week 4 or 5. And we all bought into Dontavian Wicks. Christian Watson got hurt. Jordan Love had that comeback effort against the Vikings. He threw 55 passes. And it was a very important lesson. Just be careful buying into players when their quarterback throws 55 times. Justin Herbert, I think, threw 54 times on Sunday. And he's got so many guys to throw to. So they are actually leading the NFL in pass attempts per game. So I will say that. But it's 39, the Chargers. And it just makes me a little nervous about thinking there's going to be any consistency from Gadsden. I feel like Schultz has been consistent for now 4 straight weeks, 6 or more targets. And this is obviously contingent on Nico Collins not playing. He could play. But I think Schultz could have a really big game if Nico's out.
It's a fair point. I also will just counter your Herbert take there with Will Dissly was a fantasy starter for us last year at that position. And
yeah,
then when he got hurt with Stone Smart, we were chasing him. Like, they like this position quite a bit.
Will Dissly wasn't really that good though. And
no, but that's the difference. Is Aronde Gadsden is.
He is good. He is really good.
The tight end spot was a pretty prominent position. It has been for Greg Roman's offense forever. And I think it's something that's sustainable for Gadsden if they continue to throw the ball around 40 times per game.
All right, now it is time for coverage you can count on, sponsored by Nationwide. Jamey, give me a DST to stream this week.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to change my priority for the top 3 for this week. Colts DST 1, Colts DST 2, and Colts DST 3. I mean, they're home against the Titans. There isn't a better option to pick up off waivers this week. If you don't love your DS, like I have the Broncos in several leagues, I'm going to carry 2 DSTs this week and pick up the Colts.
The other DSTs that you recommended would be?
The Falcons taking on trio Tagovailoa of interceptions. And then the Bucks against the Saints.
That was really good. Oh, wow. Colts, Falcons, Bucks. I think Colts and Falcons probably in a tier above the Bucks.
Slightly, but I mean, we've seen this Bucks. I mean, they just lost their center and their backup running back, who's been playing almost as much as their starting running back.
Yeah, Saints have allowed 10 or more fantasy points to 4 of the past 5 DSTs they faced. The one that wasn't was the Giants back in week 5. That sounds amazing, but Titans have allowed at least 18 plus to 4 of their past 5, 13 plus to 6 of 7. The Colts are number 1, and it's not even close.
Yeah, Thomas, change my answer for the 1 o'clock show. Colts DST 1.
And 2 and 3?
No, just 1, and then we'll let's go Colts DST 1.
Who needs receivers and tight ends and running backs anyway?
I'm going Colts DST 1, Flacco 2, Gaston 3.
Holy moly. Okay. And that was coverage you can count on, sponsored by Nationwide. And Jamey, give us some kickers real quick.
The kickers for this week, you got Matt Prater coming with still the starting opportunity with doesn't seem like Tyler Bass is coming back. Evan McPherson in a home game against the Jets. And let's give Jake Moody some credit. You know, he flops with the 49ers. He catches on with Chicago and does a nice job for them. So as you mentioned yesterday, though, Adam, make sure Eddie Pinheiro is not on your waiver wire. 77% rostered. So most people have him already, but he's been fantastic for the 49ers. And that's always kind of been a position of strength for them fantasy-wise.
Eddie Pinheiro has not missed. He is 17 of 17, including 5 of 5 from 50 or more yards. Insane. He has missed an extra point, though, loser. All right, we're going to take a break, talk about shallow league.
As a Giants fan, you really cannot call any kicker who's missed an extra point a loser.
It was somewhat of a reference to the Giants.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be right back with shallow leagues, deep leagues, a quick look at Monday Night Football, and the rest of the waiver wire. I'll be right back.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Okay, Jamey, shallow league guys, who are the best of the best that you'd be interested in?
Why did Wendy have to go there? What a horrible, horrible memory that was.
Oh, was that the fantasy championship? She said, remember the Colts DST when they were your number 1
against the Giants?
Oh, right. I don't think that was week 16, I want to say, or was it? Maybe it was 17. Yeah,
it was. I think the first week of the playoffs, second week of the semifinals.
Big win for the Giants. They took themselves out of the number 1 pick that week. Yeah.
Thanks, Wendy.
It's a good point, Wendy. Thank you.
One of my better rants. What was the question? I'm sorry, Adam.
Yeah, the shallow league guys, the best of the best.
So you mentioned the quarterbacks already, Jackson Dart, Aaron Rodgers. Those 2 guys are definitely in play. And then I still think if you can carry Brock Purdy, at some point he's going to start. We know they've been throwing the ball a ton, and he's going to potentially step back into a situation where everybody's healthy. So he's on that list as well. Running backs a little bit better than the guys that we've talked about from who's available now. You mentioned Aaron Jones. It's 84% rostered, but he's eligible to return this week. Tyler Algier, 3 of his last 5 games now. He struggled in week 7, but 3 of his last 5 games, he's been 10.3 PPR points or more, taking on the Dolphins. They probably have an opportunity to run the ball with whoever they want to. And then I still want to roster Kenneth Gainwell. I know he wasn't great last week, but he's been pretty solid from a potential flex option and has lottery ticket appeal. He's 69% rostered. At wide receiver, you mentioned Travis Hunter. He's 70% rostered, so you can carry him through their bye week if you want to. Wan'Dale Robinson's 80% rostered. Khalil Shakir is 80% rostered. Obviously, Wan'Dale's been very hot the last 2 weeks. We'll see what happens when Slayton returns, but he's been playing well without Malik Neighbors on the field. Shakir clearly has had a very solid season, as he usually does. And then Trey Tucker as well. 73% roster. You're going to carry him through their bye week. And Kayshon Boutte, I know it was a big play last week, but he does have 12.5 PPR points now in 2 of in both of his last 2 games. So doing a nice job. Tight end, there's just another handful of guys. Like, this is why this position in 10-team leagues could be very frustrating for fantasy managers.
Yeah.
We don't know if Dalton Kincaid's going to return this week, coming back from the bye week after missing week 6 with the oblique injury, but he's had a great season. TJ Hawkinson he's kind of the new Dalton Schultz, I guess, if you want to go that route. 9.8 PPR points or more in 3 straight games. And Harold Fannin and Kyle Pitts. I think Fannin will be better than he was last week, even against the Patriots. And Pitts was fantastic last week, which was a surprise because Mooney did play, but now he gets the Dolphins in week 8.
Okay. Dave,
Yes,
I'm an experienced fantasy player, and I don't waste my time with leagues like that. None of those guys are available in my league. Who would you recommend in the deeper leagues?
You sound like John Cena when he's doing voiceovers for commercials. Quarterback, it's pretty easy. Joe Flacco, 78% available. He should be there in most leagues. But if he's not, Jamie brought up Marcus Mariota. There's still Carson Wentz out there in 82% of leagues. And watching him is amusing. Sometimes he's terrible. But I think this short week game against the Chargers, could be high scoring. I kind of like him. I like the way that he connected with Jordan Addison as soon as Addison came back. And, Justin Jefferson's going to put up numbers. I also don't know how much I can count on that Vikings run game to be awesome on the short week. We're going to start Jordan Mason, but I kind of feel like it's a game where we're going to start a lot of Vikings and a lot of Chargers, and Wentz should fall into some decent numbers there. Andy Dalton's also available in 99% of leagues. At running back, Monangai, 71% available. Brashard Smith, Jamie mentioned him, 82% available. Isaiah Davis is 85% available. Devin Neal is the new Kendre Miller. So you kind of stash him and hope that things break right for him and he becomes a starter toward the end of the year. So 98% available there. At wide receiver, you've got both the Broncos guys, Mims and Franklin. You can take your pick on which one you want to spin the roulette ball on. They're interesting, 70+% available. Xavier Leggett, 90% available. We should probably talk about him at some point. Josh Reynolds is 98% available. Don't want to use him. But if it's Tyrod Taylor, at least there's somebody who's got a semblance of passing acumen and ability who you might be able to trust with Josh Reynolds if you're absolutely desperate. Chris Moore is also 93% available. He's been pretty good the past couple of weeks, and Mariota's been a pretty decent passer. Gadsden, 90% available at tight end. We've talked about him too much, but you know what to expect. And then Noah Fant, 95% available. Maybe he ends up having another decent week, 5-6 targets. I'd much rather have Gadsden, Otten, etc. But you're talking about guys in deep leagues. He'll be out there.
I don't have them in the column yet, but you may see them by the end of the day. There could be 3 more quarterbacks that you could be looking at in Superflex leagues. You could be looking at Snoop Huntley if Lamar Jackson does not play, because my guess is they would go to him at this point, based on what we saw last time that they are on the field. You could be looking at either Zach Wilson or Quinn Ewers if the Dolphins decide to bench Tua Tagovailoa, because Mike McDaniel, who still has his job, says that they're going to make some changes, and Tua's been awful in the last 2 games with 6 interceptions and just passed for only 100 yards against the Browns. And then if Penix has this foot injury, we could see Kirk Cousins. So we have 3 quarterbacks that may step into starting roles this week. So just keep that in mind for Superflex and 2 QB leagues.
I don't think we said in this segment, Tyrod Taylor, but he could be the starter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we said.
I don't think we did. I mean, we said him earlier.
You have potentially 5 quarterback options in Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues.
Yeah.
Would you rather have Taylor or Dalton? Because Dalton's available everywhere.
Taylor.
I would rather have Taylor by a mile for this week, but we don't know how long that's going to happen. But
we don't know that he's even starting this week.
It's true. We don't. That's why Dalton is the guy I'd pick up first.
But what Jamie just said, Tyrod Taylor could be the starter for the rest of the season. And Tyrod Taylor, look, he actually really struggled last week. But if you look at his recent game logs, he's usually about 20 fantasy points. He's kind of like Mariota. And if he has Garrett Wilson, I think he'll be okay.
Certainly for this week.
Sure. If he had Garrett Wilson against Cincinnati.
But
awesome.
I mean, like,
he might not.
We
also don't know if he's starting for sure.
If you told me that Tyrod Taylor was the starter for the rest of the season in our Superflex league, I would drop Cam Ward for him.
Sure.
I think he'll be a lot better than, Cam Ward, I cannot believe how bad he's been. Okay, Seattle, let's just be real quick on these games, guys. Seattle 27, Houston 19. I think this, if you didn't watch this game because it was at 4 a.m., the offensive line for the Texans had no chance. I mean, Stroud was under pressure all day. They couldn't run the ball. Good day for Woody Marks in terms of usage. He even got all the goal line work and the short yardage work. He had a horrible game. He caught a touchdown, but he couldn't run. Seattle's run defense is elite, arguably the best in the NFL.
Yeah, it was a disaster of a situation for the Texans. And the Seahawks kept giving them every chance to stay in the game. It was the most insane. I don't know what Clint Kubiak was doing. I know they can't run the ball, but like you were giving them every chance. They were teeing off on Sam Darnold too.
Yeah, great defenses. And Jamey had a really funny tweet. I wanted to say something, but I felt like it was kind of wrong. But Jamey went there. I think he said if the Texans had George Springer, they'd win this game. Just rubbing salt in that wound. But all right, Jamey, you give me a major takeaway from Seattle and Houston. And actually, I'll ask you the question here. Concussion aside, when he's back, when he's healthy, what's your level of concern for Nico Collins, who had a dud on 10 for 27 on 10 targets?
I think you have to put him in the same category with hopefully what we've seen the last couple of weeks as Brian Thomas Jr. and Ladd McConkey and A.J. Brown. Those guys have been just disappointments, but there's still reason for hope because of, what their roles are in their offense. And I'm going to guess there'll probably be some chirping going on at some point. Like, why am I not getting the ball? And maybe I can be a playmaker. He had a bad drop, so it can't just be, all on the coaching staff and the quarterback at this point. But the offensive line's been a problem. Stroud's been a problem. I'd be looking to buy low on Nico Collins, especially if he's going to miss this week. So still an opportunity for him to be a difference maker. The big takeaway for me from that game would be kind of what my thought was going into the game. Sam Darnold in tough matchups is not somebody you want to necessarily trust. And so low end starter, this was his worst game to date, but I felt he would be in that 18 to 20 point per game range when facing a defense like this. Like I thought he got off to a great start. He looked like he was playing very well. And then the fumble in the end zone and the interception, like you started to see some things that just looked rough. And so when he's facing these tough matchups, like I was struggling yesterday with, do I put him on the drop list because of going into a bye week? And I'm like, well, if he plays great, there's no way anybody's dropping him going into his bye week. Now he's droppable, so you hope to pick him back up going into week 9. But if you have a roster spot to create or a quarterback that you just need to swap out, like I'm going to drop him for Joe Flacco and just see what Flacco does. And I might stick with Flacco over Darnold rest away.
I don't have a problem with that. I do like the schedule for Seattle rest of season, though. They still have 2 games against the Rams. They've got another Atlanta might be a tough matchup for them. But I think there's a lot of really favorable matchups coming up where the pass rush pressure won't be on Darnold. And so I think he can still be good. Is he worth holding on to? No, because I think you can get him back a week later without much static from the rest of your league. It's different in Superflex league. Obviously, you're going to hang on to him there. On the topic of Nico, buying low on him makes sense, but just have the right expectations in mind for him. Before this week, he had 14.2, 22.4, 11.9, 16.0 PPR points. That's like top 15-ish. That's pretty good. So I think as long as you're viewing him that way and not top 5-ish, you'll be all right with Nico Collins.
Detroit 24 and Tampa Bay 9. Really just an oddly terrible game for Baker Mayfield. He missed the Mecca Ibuka twice for what should have been touchdowns. He missed Tez Johnson wide open in the end zone for what should have been a 20-yard touchdown. And Baker scores 13.1 fantasy points on 50 pass attempts. This was a Jahmyr Gibbs game. He was even better than his numbers. His runs were incredible. 17 carries, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 catches for 82 yards. Dave, just your thoughts real quick on David Montgomery and Jamison Williams, who were nightmares.
Big time nightmare. Sam Laporta wasn't exactly great either. And it turned out to be one of those games where the Lions could lean on their running attack. And by running attack, I mean Gibbs, but Montgomery still had 13 carries. He had 2 catches too, but they didn't have to throw a ton. And the end result was Jared Goff not having a big game and all the other players that we talked about, Laporta, Jameson Williams, not doing much. That's game script. That's going to happen. And it's a little surprising that it happened, but I think it's because Tampa Bay couldn't hold up their end of the bargain, even though they had some opportunities given to them by the Lions to stay in the game, at least through the first 2.5 quarters of the game. So I think you're still going to view all these Lions as rosterable going into the bye. I'd be shocked if people were dropping Goff, but maybe if you're in a roster crunch, you could let him go. If either of Laporta or Jameson Williams were dropped in my league, I would go and try and pick them up and just carry them through the week 8 bye, because I do think there will be matchups coming up where we will want them. We'll feel confident about the game script that the Lions will be in. Montgomery too. I don't see people dropping him at all.
Okay. Do you guys still consider Baker Mayfield a must-start quarterback moving forward with no Evans?
Sure.
Yes. Now, the high-end potential is probably not there, but this week he's a top 12 quarterback without question against the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that you go into the bye week, you're not dropping him. And then again, mystery box, right? They come back with Godwin if he's right. They come back with McMillan maybe at some point if he's, right. Like, there's still a lot to love about that receiving core. It's pretty solid. And he was having good games without Evans anyway.
Okay.
I do not like the 3 games that he has coming out of the bye. New England at home, at Buffalo, at the Rams.
When he's right, the matchups just don't matter. And he had a big game right against
Sure.
Houston, I think, and
Sure.
Atlanta. He scored 28.6 points against Atlanta, 30.7 at Seattle. Okay. Drop-o-meter 0 to 10 on Travion Henderson.
7.
1 or 2.
He's a handcuff at this point, right?
Maybe. They were talking up Terrell Jennings after the game. Is that who had the run late for them?
Okay, Hunter Henry 0 to 10. He's 86% rostered.
10.
Yeah, he's a 10. The only trepidation I have is all of his good games have been at home, and they were just 3 straight games on the road.
How many tight ends did we talk about on today's show?
Oh, that's the easy reason to drop him because of
Yeah.
all these guys available. But he was this guy the early part of the season.
This is who Heath is going to add because everybody else is dropping him.
Jerry Jeudy 0 to 10.
27.7, which is how many total PPR points he probably has this year.
Jacoby Myers 0 to 10.
I'd say like a 2.
Yeah, I'm holding him for sure through the trade deadline.
Yeah.
And Trey Tucker?
0.
Though I would argue both of them are droppable, but the types of receivers that you don't want to drop. You've got to be in a real roster crunch to let go of one or both of those guys.
But this is kind of a mini Wandale because everybody picked him up after the 3 touchdown game. He had a dud the next game, and then he's kind of had this quiet production of 11 PPR points, 12 PPR points. Like, he hasn't been completely awful. And now you may have a situation where the other guy's traded.
Tucker, yeah. But Bowers should be back. But don't forget, Tucker had 6 targets, and they ran 30 plays. So he actually, had a good role. They just didn't do anything. Drop-o-meter on Kareem Hunt.
6.
5.
Rashid Shaheed, 74% rostered.
Again,
You might need him this week.
he may get traded too. Like,
Right.
I would wait.
Yeah.
Would you drop Rashid Shaheed for Tez Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, if these are the last guys on your roster,
yes.
then yes, you're dropping them. But I think most 12-team leagues don't have the luxury of dropping guys like this.
DJ Moore.
He's same boat as Shaheed.
Yeah.
Maybe a little better because, he could get traded, but it would surprise me at this point.
Okay. It's funny team name Tuesday here from Mike. Say hello to Evans, Temple of the Dog. That's good.
Say goodbye to Evans.
Yeah, say goodbye to Evans. I guess that's true.
No
Okay,
one
waiver wire. Here we go. Any names that we didn't mention? Quarterback. You got Goff, Kyler, Lawrence, Stafford, Geno, and Darnold on a bye. So
what am I going to do without Geno?
Brock Purdy, they got Houston this week. That's obviously a super tough matchup, but after that, the schedule will get a little easier. But yeah, Purdy, if he were available versus Jackson Dart, who would you guys pick up?
I would take Dart just with the uncertainty of Purdy playing, but long term, I'd rather have Purdy. So I don't need a quarterback.
Yeah.
I'd rather have Purdy.
Okay. Aaron Rodgers and Jackson Dart are 67% available, and then it's Flacco. So Jamey already said he would prioritize them. Dart, Flacco, Rodgers, both for this week and rest of season. Marcus Mariota is at Kansas City, who have allowed 4 passing touchdowns in their last 6 games, I believe. But Mariota did score 22.3 and 20 fantasy points in 2 starts earlier this year. Michael Penix
I think he's averaging 30 yards per game on the ground.
Yeah, that's not bad. Michael Penix has the Dolphins, and then you got JJ McCarthy, who could be back maybe next week. and you've got Tyrod Taylor, Andy Dalton in the super flex leagues. Do you think, just make a yes or no here, do you think Trevor Lawrence is a player? Because Lawrence has had 3 solid games in a row, 19.6 fantasy points against the Rams, but before that, 28.2 and 23.2. Is he a guy that's worth holding through the bye, or no with Lawrence?
If you have quarterback issues, then yes. But again, is he better than Flacco rest of season? And if you have any doubt in your mind, I'd pivot.
Okay.
And I have doubt. So.
Yeah, right. I was about to say, I've got some doubt.
Dave mentioned Carson Wentz, who's 18% rostered, facing the Chargers, who
they've been pretty good against quarterbacks.
They've allowed multiple touchdown passes to only one quarterback. It was last week against Daniel Jones. Running back. So Aaron Jones is 84% rostered, and again, he's eligible to return this week. So he might be the prize out there. Tyler Algier, look, he could get 16 carries. He's had 16 carries twice this year, and they were a 16-point win and a 7-point win. They're facing the Dolphins. You could see it for Algier. Gainwell, disappointing usage last week. Only 5 touches. Kyle Monangai. So do you think that he is going to get a third of the carries going forward?
I think the thing you got to look at is we always see this with teams coming off of bye weeks and rookies. Like they start to give them more work. And his 2 highest usage games have been the last 2 weeks. You mentioned this, Adam. He was going into the week in terms of DeAndre Swift, banged up. Dave said both are accurate. The Saints' run defense fell apart. The Bears' run blocking was fantastic, maybe the best it's been all season. So how much of this was a byproduct of more work coming his way? How much of it was a byproduct of Swift not being 100%, missing some practice time? How much of it was the run defense being awful? I think in the case of Swift, who's had some injury concerns over his career, I want to roster Kyle Monangai. And for this week, he's in that flex conversation because of who they may be facing. If the Ravens don't have Lamar Jackson, we've seen this defense, how bad it's been. And this Bears offense is starting to look a lot better, especially with the way they're running the ball. So Monangai, to me, falls into flex conversation. There are 3 guys, again, that I think you can use as flex options. Isaiah Davis would be the other one because Brees Hall may not be 100%. And they're playing the Bengals, and we know they're going to probably run the ball no matter who the quarterback is. And then you have Rashard Smith, who quietly has been 5.1 PPR points or more in 4 straight games, with the spike game that we saw last week was coincided with a 31-0 blowout and Kareem Hunt being banged up. So you have some guys that play here, like Dave threw out the name Tyjae Spears. I'd rather start all these guys over Tyjae Spears.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, what's the upside with Tyjae Spears? The problem is that what's the upside with a lot of these running backs?
Well, I mean, Spears scored 9 points in week 6 and 7 points in week 7. If Isaiah Davis is in his normal role, he's getting
that's like 6 PPR points.
But that's against the Bengals now. That's the point. It's just for
but
this
he
week.
doesn't.
I'd rather roster Tyjae Spears.
But he doesn't play.
See, I might rather roster the other guys, but if I had to start a running back, I'd start Tyjae Spears. And Monangai, go ahead, Adam. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying, like, it's not like Tyjae Spears isn't a good handcuff at the same time. I mean, most handcuffs are not scoring 7 PPR fantasy points per game. Yeah, I don't know.
Right, but I guess let's take Isaiah Davis out of this because that team's terrible, and it's really more of I'd like to see what the practice reports are for Brees Hall on top of the fact that he may get traded. So, but take him out of the equation. Like, if you tell me right now, Rashard Smith is building towards something or Tyjae Spears is building towards something, I'd rather have Smith.
I'm not telling you that Brashard Smith is building towards something, though. He had 10 of his 14 carries after Pacheco's.
No. I'm not saying that he is, but if Hunt misses any time, his role in the pack. I mean, he's been 3 catches in 4 straight games.
Yeah,
so they are using him to a certain extent, and we know this run game has been awful. That's the last piece that's missing to this team right now.
All right, guys. Zonovan Knight, Dave mentioned him earlier. You could pick him up. He could give you a must start. I mean, it could give you a startable week against the Cowboys in week 9. Trey Benson is 63. Okay, Trey Benson 63% rostered. Pick him up. Devin Neal,
great stash if you can get him.
Yeah, Devin Neal, Brian Robinson, Emmanuel Wilson. These are interesting handcuffs that are available. Wide receiver. So let's say Jamey's shallow league guys at wide receiver, Dave. They're Wan'Dale Robinson, Khalil Shakir, Trey Tucker, Travis Hunter, Kayshon Boutte. Wandale
Wow.
Robinson, Khalil Shakir, Trey Tucker, Travis Hunter, Kayshon Boutte. Who are the best ones there?
Wandale would be the best one for this week. Travis Hunter for rest of season. I love that list until you got to Trey Tucker, and then I was kind of like, not so much. But I do think that there's all kinds of appeal for Wandale this week. He had another good PPR game last week. And then Travis Hunter, if you want to talk about somebody building towards something, question mark about Brian Thomas Jr. at this point, you could really start to see it with Travis Hunter. It just took 7 weeks.
All right. You guys talked about Darnell Mooney. And with all these teams on bye, you're going to need wide receivers this week. So Jamey's got Mooney, Tez Johnson. He actually likes Jalen Knoll third. If you're looking at this screen, so there's 2 names in between Mooney and Jennings. Originally, it was Mooney 1, Juwan Jennings 2. Now it's Mooney 1, Tez Johnson 2, Jalen Knoll 3, Juwan Jennings 4, then Josh Downs, who hopefully is back this week. And if he's not, you can consider Alec Pierce, who had 10 targets last week. Troy Franklin, Dave likes Marvin Mims, and then there's Xavier Liga at the bottom here.
Right. My order would be Tez Johnson 1, Darnell Mooney 2, and Marvin Mims 3, but it's definitely tailored more toward week 8 than a rest of season type of view. And I think you do have to consider Xavier Liga after what he did last week, and especially after what Jalen Coker did last week. The one concern was all of that a byproduct of just taking on the Jets, knowing that Sauce Gardner lined up against Ted McMillan for a bunch of the game, and both quarterbacks, Bryce Young and then Andy Dalton, knew better. And also there were a lot of short throws to Liga. He had his last catch was his best catch. And I believe he has more red zone and end zone targets on the year than Tedero McMillan. I don't know if that stat still stands, but we talked about that earlier in the year. So I don't know if I'm crazy about Lee yet. I mean, he's already 5th on my list. Probably should be 6th because Juwan Jennings should be higher. We don't know if Josh Downs is going to be back. I'm not sure how much the Colts will have to throw against Tennessee either. So everybody's going to love Tez. Somebody's going to probably overbid for him, and somebody's going to make him their number 1 waiver claim in every single league.
Yeah, it might be me. So just the names again: Darnell Mooney, Tez Johnson. Dave would prefer Tez this week. Jalen Knoll. I'm a little hesitant on Jalen Knoll. This is another one where CJ Stroud threw 49 passes in this game. He might have to throw a lot against San Francisco too, but 49 is a lot. But it is, look, it's Nico being concussed. It's Christian Kirk being out. It's a huge opportunity for Jalen Knoll. Juwan Jennings. Can't sit here and say Juwan Jennings doesn't have long-term potential because we've seen him be really good in stretches. He's 64% rostered. And then you can look at the Colts guys, Josh Downs and Alec Pierce, the Broncos guys, Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims, the Cowboys, 31st against wide receivers. Lee gets there. And then super deep, Chris Moore. That would really be contingent on Debo and McLaurin not playing. Jack Besh as a stash. Chimere DK coming off.
Yeah, I was about to mention Chimere DK. He popped for me on film when I went back and watched that game. And he's 98% available. If you're in a redraft league, you're probably not adding DK, but those deeper leagues, just make sure that he's deeper leagues where there's keeper questions. Like he might be somebody that's worth stashing. He can move a little bit.
There are a few other players. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, DK is good. Very good athletic.
He might be better than Io Manor.
There are a few other players. There's Calvin Ridley in shallow leagues who coming off that big game. Then he got hurt. He's 70% rostered. I have no idea if he's going to play this week. They get the Colts, which is the best matchup in fantasy right now. And Darius Slayton, again, I don't know if he's going to play, but he's down to 22% rostered. I still think there's reason to think he could be streamable. And this one, I don't really believe Malik Washington, but with Darren Waller out, there's some appeal. But Sterling Shepard at 33% rostered. He could have, he had 7 targets. He caught all of them. They went for 25 yards. But Sterling Shepard might get you in the 10 PPR fantasy point range. Mm-hmm. All right.
We talked about him last week in that exact lens, that he's just got that safe floor.
Also, please make sure when you look at the projections, when you're making your roster moves, that you also look at rest of season projections. So some of the guys who are on bye, like Travis Hunter, who might be available or something, that you see all of these options. Okay, tight ends. In shallow leagues, how many of these guys do you prefer to a Rondé Gadsden or Cade Otton? Dalton Kincaid, TJ Hawkinson, who has now 7.9 or more PPR fantasy points in 4 straight games. Harold Fannin Jr., Kyle Pitts, and that's it. So it's Kincaid, Hawkinson, Fannin, Pitts. How many of them do you prefer to Gadsden and Otten?
Kincaid would be the first one. Pitts would be the second one. And it's going to be close between Pitts and Otten for this week.
So
Rest
you
of season, it's easy, Pitts.
You take Otten over Fannin
Yes.
this week?
Yeah, at this point, I'm just playing the waiver wire and streaming tight ends anyway. So Otten is arguably the best streamer for this week.
I like Fannin a lot, because they're going to have to throw more against the Patriots than they did.
He's also rostered in like 70% of leagues already, Fannin.
But people might say, should I drop Harold Fannin for Gadsden, for Otten? Do it for Otten. Would you do it for Gadsden?
Yes.
Would you do it for Dalton Schultz?
Probably, from the idea of I just need somebody for this week, and there's a safe floor with Schultz. We talked about it earlier on the show. 11 plus PPR each of his last 2 games. You said 6 targets for him each of his past 4.
3 straight games with 6, and then last night he had 10 targets, Dalton Schultz.
Mm-hmm. And we're assuming that and he's a week-to-week guy too. So we're assuming that Nico isn't playing and Schultz will see an uptick in targets. Now, if Nico ends up playing, you're going to kick Schultz to the curb, most likely.
Yeah, I don't know if you have to, but you're going to certainly lower your expectation.
And you're not going to start him over Otten or Gadsden, I don't think.
And then there's Mason Taylor. How do you feel about Mason Taylor in this amazing matchup?
It's an amazing matchup, but he had an amazing matchup last week and he didn't do anything. It's really hard to have faith in any Jet player other than Breece Hall. And even then, it's not like where you would normally have high faith in him. And then Garrett Wilson, once Garrett Wilson comes back. I mean, it's really a rotten offense that they've got.
Okay. Juwan Johnson coming off a big game with so many good options. I just don't see why you need to buy back into Juwan Johnson.
Nope.
Colston Loveland's got an opportunity this week against Baltimore if Cole Kmet is out. Theo Johnson was very lucky against Denver. He had a terrible game against Philly 2 weeks ago, so I don't think you want to go there.
Not excited about him either.
The Packers are giving up the second most fantasy points to tight ends this year, and they've got the Steelers, and the Steelers have 3 tight ends that they use. Do you like any of those guys?
Yeah, Jonnu's buried on the list. It would have to be the deepest of leagues to add Jonnu Smith, but the theory is Rodgers, who's already getting the ball out as fast as he possibly can when he's not playing Cincinnati, will need short area targets, and that's what Jonnu Smith has been basically for the last 2 years. So going with Jonnu and hoping that he gets 4 catches for a floor of 50 yards, that's probably what you're looking at with him. Maybe he scores on top of it, but that doesn't make him anywhere close to as good as the tight ends that we've already been talking about.
Okay. All right. And then the DSTs, we love the Colts this week, and the Falcons get the Dolphins, and the Buccaneers are at the Saints. Kickers, Matt Prater, Evan McPherson, Jake Moody. But again, make sure Eddie Pinheiro is not available, because if he is, you need to get Eddie Pinheiro. All right. Long show, important show. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jamey. Thank you, Thomas. Any more questions for the waiver wire? We'll talk to you at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. See you later, everyone.